Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
And I am your host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, here with you live at Kardec Radio. And dear Kardec Radio listener, we have a very beautiful show today as well. It's about the hidden gifts of giving. We have the honor to have with us live Dr. Stephen Post from New York. Who is Dr. Post? Dr. Post is this amazing mind who is opening new venues of research. He's the best-selling author of The Hidden Gifts of Helping, How the Power of Giving, Compassion, and Hope Can Get Us Through Hard Times. And he is in the nonfiction bestseller list with the Wall Street Journal. He is the professor of preventive medicine, head of the Division of Medicine in Society, and director of the Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics at Stony Brook University. Dr. Post is who was previously professor of bioethics, religion, and philosophy, School of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University, and senior research scholar at the Beckett Institute at St. Hugh's College at Oxford University. He is also a senior fellow in the Center for the Study of Law and Religion at Emory University. He has amazing research happening especially on altruism, love, and compassion in the integrative context of scientific research, philosophy, and spirituality. He's the president of the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love, which is a non-profit organization established in July 2001 and supported by John Templeton from the Templeton Foundation. Dr. Post has so much to share with us. His philosophy is so beautiful. If you go to his website, www.stephengpost.com, you're going to read the beautiful philosophy of the hidden gifts of helping. He talks about the expressions of it, including celebration, helping, forgiveness, carefrontation, humor, respect, attentive listening, compassion, loyalty, and creativity. It's a happy show. How else can we be happy? Recently, a good message that was received at the Spiritus Society of Baltimore, we got this: without charity there is salvation. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, when the good enlightening spirits share with us the importance of dedicating our lives to the benefit of everyone. Get out of this selfishness. And talking about selfishness and the ways into this blessed life of giving. In the Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec, question 1001, Kardec actually asked a question that is very modern because let's think about it, dear listener. How many of us are concerned about our problems and our lives, and then suddenly we realize that we need to give of ourselves? Many people say, yeah, by the day I die, then I'm going to donate everything that I have for the poor. Is there merit on it? So let us reflect together. Kardec asked this question to the enlightening spirits at his time. Is there any merit in ensuring that after death, the property we have left behind will be put to good use? What is the answer of the illuminated entities? They say, merit is not quite the right term, but it is always better than doing nothing. Unfortunately, those who only give after their death are usually more selfish than generous. They want the honors of charitable acts without having to practice them. Those who deprive themselves during life have a double advantage: the merit of sacrifice and the pleasure of witnessing the happiness of those whom they have benefited. Selfishness, however, is always ready to whisper that whatever you give away will deprive you of your own enjoyment. And since selfishness speaks louder than selflessness and charity, people hold on to their possessions under the pretext that they are necessary for satisfying their needs and the requirements of their position in society. pity those who do not know the pleasure of giving, for they have really deprived themselves of one of the purest and sweetest enjoyments of humanity, in subjecting them to the trial of wealth, so slippery and dangerous for their fortune and future. God has wished to give them, by way of compensation, the happiness of generosity, which they can enjoy right now in this world. So the good and enlightening spirits, dear listener, are telling us, let us give of ourselves and share what we have right now. Do not wait until you pass away to share, because there's this beautiful message, which is at the vanguard of scientific research, because it was given to you in 1857 at Kardec's time. It shares with us something quite unique that Dr. Post is going to tell us about the pleasure of giving. The Spirit said, for they who do not know the pleasure of giving, they are depriving themselves of one of the purest and sweetest enjoyments of humanity. And Dr. Post is this leading mind who is bringing to us the proof, the scientific proof, that this is so true. As he says in his review, it is good to be good. It's really good to be good. It feels good. And it's so good that we are here with you at Kardec Radio. And Kardec Radio is all about this. It's about this practice of selflessness. We're not connected to anything in specific, but to this Spiritist philosophy, to bring us this beautiful foundation in life. And to talk about foundation, many people have been writing us because they want the bumper sticker, the Kardec Radio bumper sticker. If you want one, it's very simple. Call us today. Make a comment or a question. We have Kirsten DeMello helping us screen the callers, so you can call in, ask a question to Dr. Post or ourselves, and tell us what you like about Kardec Radio, or go to our website, kardecradio.com. Share with us what you like about it. We have a contact form. Send in your address, and we're going to send you a Kardec Radio bumper sticker, so you share the good news with everyone. And we had actually a web poll in our website to talk about specifically the show. And we asked this question, is being charitable good for your health? And the majority of people, 82% of people actually said yes. 14% said maybe, which is fair because we need Dr. Post research to validate that it's really good for your health, the charitableness of our hearts. And only 4% of people are still doubtful about it, but majority of people are already lined up with this understanding. It's more than a belief, because science now proves to us that being charitable is good, and only Dr. Post to tell us how the connection of our mind, heart, and the physiology. It's about the psychobiology of being good, if we may say this way. And who is our Kardec listener? I know many of you have been asking, who is listening to the show? This week we're completing a month of the foundation of the Kardec Radio. And we're blessed and honored to be here in the team who is working on the behind the scenes to bring this illumination to your hearts, to your homes. Open the doors of your homes to Kardec Radio, because we only have good news to share with you. If you are sick and tired of the news that only brings sad news, here we are to share the goodness of the world, because the world is getting better. Oh, yes, it is. No doubt about it. We're not a caveman time, though it's a tricky time, because we can see more clearly the good and the bad that is going around due to many factors. But Kardec Radio is here for you to say, keep on hoping and trying, because the world is getting better. And why wouldn't it? If God is so good and brought us Jesus' message to illuminate our minds, without Jesus our lives would be so sad. Jesus is this life brought to us. And our dear Kardec Radio listener is 70% in the North America, 16% in South America, 6% in Europe, and we also have listeners in Asia, Africa, and Australia. In this world, we have 35 countries that are listening to Kardec Radio. Amongst them, 70% of our listeners are in the United States of America and 15% in Brazil, 6% in Canada, to almost 3% in the United Kingdom, a smaller percentage in Australia, and rest of the percentage, 7%, is in other countries. 35 countries listening to us, and within the United States of America, 39 states have Kardec Radio listeners. We need to grow and fill it up. We need all the other 11 states in. So if you have friends in other states, call them and say, let's have the whole United States of America listening to this illuminated show that only tells us the good things about our planet Earth, the good people like Dr. Stephen Post who are making a difference. Yes, there are people in this world making a difference. And talking about making a difference, we would like to share with you a beautiful case that was brought to us through the amazing hands of the charitable heart of the Brazilian medium Chico Xavier. Amongst the 400-plus books that he brought to us in automatic writing, we have one that is entitled Jesus in the Home, and there's a beautiful account that expressed to us how good it is to be good. Before we bring Dr. Post into the show, we want to share with you this beautiful case that is entitled Mutual Help. Listen to this, dear listener.
From the book Jesus in the Home, Chapter 16, Mutual Help, by the Spirit Neo Lucio, psychographed by Chico Xavier. In the company of his peers, Andrew read a meaningful passage from Isaiah and spoke emotionally about the need for salvation. Matthew commented on the less pleasant aspects of work, and Philip talked about how hard it was to look after our own affairs when we are dedicated to helping others. Jesus was listening to his disciples in silence, and when the discussion began to die down, he commented candidly. Two old friends were walking through the desert region of a mountainous area. Both were feeling ill and were trying to protect themselves as best they could from the blast of freezing air, when they happened upon a half-dead child lying in the road at the mercy of the high winds of winter. One of them stared at the unusual sight and said irritably, "Well, I'm not going to waste my time. I have to worry about taking care of myself. Let's move on." The other was more compassionate, however, and replied, "Friend, we must save the child. He's our brother in humanity." "I can't," said the heartless friend. "I'm tired and sick, and this stranger would be an unbearable burden. It's cold and it's storming. We have to make it to the next village without wasting another minute." And he set off in long strides. The kind-hearted traveler, however, leaned over the outstretched boy and took a few minutes to hold him paternally against his chest. Cradling him close, he pressed onward, although at a slower pace. The freezing rain fell methodically all night long. Nonetheless, after a long time carrying the precious bundle, he reached the inn in the village. He was greatly surprised when he didn't find his friend there, the one who had gone ahead of him. It was only on the following day, after a painstaking search, that the unfortunate traveler was found dead, hidden beside the flooded road. Hurriedly pressing on alone, and selfishly trying to save himself, he was unable to withstand the waves of violently cold air and fell over soaking wet without anything to help him against the freezing weather. His companion, on the other hand, had received the soft warmth from the child's body as he held it close to his heart, and had been able to endure the frigid night. Thus, he was saved from a similar tragedy. He had discovered the sublimity of mutual help. By helping the abandoned child, he had helped himself. By selflessly stepping forward to help someone else, he had managed to triumph against the hardship of the journey, thereby enjoying the blessings of mutual salvation. The simple story left the disciples taken aback and touched. A look of tender admiration was evident in the teary-eyed, humble women attending the meeting, while the men gazed at each other in wonder. After a short silence, Jesus concluded expressively, "People's most eloquent and exact testimonies before the Almighty Father are their own deeds. The very ones whom we help are our support. The heart we save will become a resource for us one day or another. Let no one doubt this. Those who live for themselves are merely a living ornament of loneliness. But those who work on behalf of others are creditors of everyone's help. By helping, we will in turn be helped. By giving, we will in turn receive. This is a divine law."
Yes, dear listener, mutual help. We don't want to be ornaments. We want to be creditors of help. We want to be those that feel this pleasure. Think about this. In the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, we have this teaching that talks about the pleasure of giving, which is one of the purest and sweetest enjoyments of humanity. How many of us listen to this voice of selfishness saying, "I'm not going to give away this thing or that thing that you accumulate in your home because you feel you'll be deprived of it"? Suggestion: if you have something that you haven't been using, don't think you're going to be using it in the future, because maybe you'll never use it. Whereas there are people in this world who need it. It's energy that you're accumulating. And you always trust that God will provide. There is divine providence. Why not trust our dear Father who provides to us everything that we need? We need to have this faith. We need it, of course, to be provident and careful, but not selfish. How many people have 3 coffee makers at home because they feel like, I may need one to do this type of coffee, that type of coffee, and maybe you need none because you drink Starbucks every day. But giving of yourself is not only about giving your material things. It's about giving of your smile, of your kindness. Because, we are human beings. There is no strong human being in this world that doesn't need a kind shoulder, a good hand of help, a good companion to come and lift us up when we feel we are struggling to live this life. We need to feel it. And, the guardian angels of us will appreciate it. To talk about the pleasures of giving and how good it is to be good, we're going to bring today Dr. Stephen Post with us. Before we bring him, we're going to talk to you about a few messages that we have at this very moment.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is, "It is Good to Be Good," featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.mdscenter.org. That is www.mdscenter.org.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Dr. Post is here with us, and we have a whole show about the hidden gifts of giving. As the Spirit said through the teachings of the Spirit's book by the researcher and codifier Allan Kardec, question 1001, the pleasure of giving, if we shall not deprive ourselves from the purest and sweetest enjoyment of humanity. And science is now proving to us how it is possible to feel even physiologically that when we're being good to others, we feel good inside of us. So let us ask Dr. Post how that is possible. Let's open the line. Dr. Post, welcome to Kardec Radio. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be with you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Dr. Post. We are so delighted with having your leading of this beautiful research on altruism, love, compassion. There's so much to learn from you, and we're sharing with Kardec Radio listener about your website, stephengpost.com, and your philosophy besides your biography. Can you tell us how you got to this pathway of being this leading scientist on the science of compassion, altruism, and love?
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of different factors, but I'll put my finger on one. Is that okay?
Of course.
When I was a little boy, 5 or 6 years old, I had a very Irish mother named Molly McGee. That's an Irish name, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And when I would have a kind of slow, boring, sad afternoon without anyone to play with occasionally, which happens, she never told me, well, Stevie, why don't you go read a book? She always said, why don't you go out and do something for someone? So I would, as a little kid, venture out across the street, Oak Neck Lane, to Mr. Muller's house or to the Lawrence's house and just do things. I'd help Mr. Muller rake his leaves in the fall, or I'd help Mr. Lawrence with his boat. And I always sensed that I felt better. And when I come home, there was a smile on my face. And over the course of my life, I was blessed by a whole number of wonderful mentors in high school in New Hampshire, in college, at the University of Chicago, in Michigan, all over, who helped me to develop a whole science around the ways in which helping others and contributing to their lives adds to our own happiness and our own health and even our own longevity. And then to top it off, in 2001, Sir John Templeton gave me almost $9 million to found the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love that has funded research all over the country and really has had the opportunity to kind of create this new field. It's good to be good, and has had a lot of impact.
Yeah, it's amazing. And many people, they feel afraid of giving because they feel they're going to be deprived of their time or themselves, their happiness, because they feel like I need to take care of myself, otherwise who else will do it? And they block themselves from giving of themselves. Is that right, Dr. Post?
Yeah, that's right. As one person said it not too long ago at a meeting, I'd given a long talk about a new study on how when widows and widowers have lost a spouse, they go through a period of grief and bereavement, but the ones who can report helping others, actively helping others, even at very low thresholds, a few hours a week, they get over their depression and their bereavement much more quickly and much more thoroughly. So then after I gave this talk and presented all the evidence, this guy in the back of the room who'd lost his wife, God bless him, he stood up and he said, I don't care what you say, I don't do nothing for nothing. Can you say that? I don't do nothing for nothing. and I just looked at it, and the point is, so many people limit themselves because they're preoccupied with tit-for-tat thinking, with payback thinking, and they need to be free of that, because the benefit is not, well, am I going to get treated exactly as nicely and generously as I treated this person or that person? The benefit is internal. It's a lot better, especially in hard times when you can get caught up in a lot of bitterness and frustration and hostility. It's a lot better to just give freely to others. They say pay it forward, just love and forget about it, as Sir John Templeton used to tell me. And if you do that, you will experience a kind of healing and a kind of joy that gives you a freedom that we were designed to have in our lives, but somehow we lose sight of it.
That's interesting. Dr. Post, let's talk about the research you do in regard to the connection between mind and body and the evidences that you have physiologically that when we are expressing ourselves in this giving mode, the body also responds at different levels. Can you share a little bit with us in that regard?
Yeah, briefly, and there are many different levels, but and I haven't done all this research. Some of it I've contributed to it, some of it I haven't, but I've helped a lot of other people be involved in this. But going way back, even 20 years, there's something called the Mother Teresa effect. So a researcher at Harvard named David McClelland divided students, undergraduates, into two groups, subjects and controls. And the subjects watched movies of Mother Teresa helping people in Calcutta, and the controls just watched an emotionally neutral movie. I'll say, okay, potato peeling. And after the movie was over, McClelland wanted to see if the strength of the immune system was different in the subjects and the controls. So he looked at something called salivary gamma globulin A. That's an immune chemical, and if it's at high levels, it means your immune system is functioning well. So the subjects who were watching the Mother Teresa movie had significantly higher levels than the controls. And then he divided the subject group into two, the ones who were watching the Mother Teresa movie. After the movie was over, right as it ended, he split them into two, and he said, half of you should imagine deeply giving generously and sincerely to others. And that half that went through that kind of mental imagery and meditation on giving, it's kind of like a loving kindness meditation, they actually showed the similar elevation in immune strength. So this is a famous study. People can Google it. It's called the Mother Teresa effect. And there are many of these things. There's a great study that was done at the National Institutes of Health about people who brought in off the street, just like you and me, and they're brought into the neurology lab. They're hooked up to a magnetic resonance device that picks up areas of the brain that are active. They're given a menu of charities that they just could consider giving money to. You know, it could be your local school, your alma mater, the library, whatever it might be, the Alzheimer's Association, the PTA. And when they get a eureka moment, I want to give to that charity, they check the box next to that item on the menu. And when they do that, a part of the brain lights up, and it's called the mesolimbic pathway, and it's associated with feelings of joy, and it even doles out feel-good chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, one of the very things that we use these days to treat depression with. And so whether you look at it neurologically or from the point of view of immunology or hormonally, when people do face-to-face giving, a hormone kicks in at high levels called oxytocin, and that's also associated with feelings of tranquility or serenity, reduced stress, inner peace, and so suddenly you begin to realize that there's a biological connection between giving to others and feeling inner peace. Not bad.
Not bad at all. It's like we could say we are wired to be good. Is that right?
Yeah, we are, and nowadays, even the really hardcore Darwinians recognize this, because when Darwin got older, he wrote a book called the Descent of Man, and he said, a lot of evolution occurs between groups, and the group is going to do best to the extent that it evolves within itself compassion, love of neighbor, benevolence, kindness, and so forth, because that's a real social asset. And it makes perfect sense that those kinds of assets would be wired into us and that we would, in fact, benefit from them. So these studies, the one on volunteerism that United Healthcare did, the largest managed care system in America, did this in 2009. There were 41% of Americans who volunteered that year, most of them at just an average of 2 hours a week. And of those volunteers, 68% reported that volunteering made them feel physically healthier. The vast majority, even greater numbers, reported that it made them feel happier, that it made them sleep better, that it made life more gratifying. You know, if you could put that in a pill and market it, you would be a multi-billionaire in a minute.
Yeah, but thank God it doesn't come in a pill. So it comes in this pill of the heart.
It's already there. That's the amazing thing. And I think a lot of the pills that are being prescribed, and many good professionals agree with this, you know, they're kind of filling in the gap. You know, if we could create a better world where people have deeper community, where they're engaged in the love of God and the love of neighbor and loving themselves rightly and being generous with others, I think that a lot of the depression, for example, would just subside over time, and there's a lot of evidence to show that. So you know, we live in a world of affluenza. I like to say that word, affluenza, like a flu, you know, like a flu, and a world where, you know, here on the north coast of Long Island, where there's a fair amount of money, so many children of wealthy people are having DUI incidents, they're having substance abuse problems, they're depressed, suicidal, can't get themselves going in life. And you know, the quickest way to overcome all this is to love your neighbor. Just reach out, volunteer. When these kids go to the third world just for a couple of weeks in the summer and help build a habitat house, or when they just do something meaningful for others where they feel gratified and effective, you know, they come back and they're smiling, they're radiant, they're just aglow like the sun, and that's the hidden gift of helping. And that's why the book is called The Hidden Gifts of Helping.
And Dr. Post, when you were talking about the childhood, you talked about your story on how important. I had my story too, with my grandmother and my parents telling me the same, like go and help others, because I grew up in Brazil, and say you need to reach out to the less privileged people. But as you're saying, our society is still raising our kids telling, think about what you like, what you want, what's best for you, in detriment to everyone else. How do you see, by the research that you're doing and many of your colleagues with this, you recognize there are more funds today than ever in regard to the support of this type of research. How do you see the world in regard to this power of giving? Do you think it's getting better? Because many people are concerned, like the world is going worse. Mm-hmm. Can you tell it's getting better as well, according to what you're experiencing in your research world?
Oh, I think it is getting better all the time. You know, it's easy to be pessimistic, because every once in a while someone will publish a big study and they'll say that, oh, college-age kids now are more selfish and narcissistic and lacking in compassion. But actually, that's not true. They're no different today than they were in the 1920s, okay? And it basically, way back in 1924 at Berkeley, you know, a group of 300 preteens, 12-year-olds, about a third to a half of them expressed really generous motivations. I want to use my gifts and talents to help others. It sounds like you back in Brazil. I want to do something with my abilities to make a difference. And then about half of them don't have that kind of view. They're just kind of basically focused on self. This study, which followed these 300 young people over the course of their lives, interviewing them every 10 years, psychological tests were given, their medical records were reviewed. So the ones who were identified early in life as wanting to help others, they were less depressed over the course of their lifetimes. They were less susceptible to heart disease and diabetes. And now that they're well into their 90s, 2/3 of the ones who are still alive come from the group that had a kind of giver's heart early in life. And so, you know, you look at it today, it's the same thing. It kind of splits, and it depends a lot on how we raise our kids. And I believe that the chief question in life right now is how to raise a caring child. It's easy to have a child physically. It just takes a few seconds.
Yeah.
You know? But how do you raise a caring child? That's the big question, because if we can raise caring children, it's great for the world around us, but it's also much better for those children themselves, because they will, in general, with exceptions. I mean, some people get a bad diagnosis in early age or have an automobile accident, but in general, it's good to be good, and you will be blessed with a happier and healthier and somewhat longer life if you live generously.
Dr. Post, we already feel so joyful to hear this news from you and to know that science is backing it up. And is that true that there are more funds? I remember talking to Dr. Tamoshak from the University of Maryland. She works on forgiveness. She said, Vanessa, 10 years ago, it was pretty hard to get funds to show the connection of mind and body in regard to forgiveness, for example. But nowadays, the funds are, just showering in. Is that the same for the research on compassion, love, and altruism?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more interest in it. I remember, I was actually part of one of the initial Templeton group that supported the forgiveness campaign in 1994. And really, at that time, there were only about 12 published scientific articles on forgiveness, okay? Now there are more than 2,000. There's a whole journal focused on forgiveness research, and I have friends like Julie Exline at Case Western who received tenure as professors based on forgiveness research. And we see studies in the American Journal of Public Health that white males in midlife who are unforgiving have higher rates of respiratory infection. We have the Forgiveness Institute at Stanford University, where women from Belfast who had lost children in the violence and were bitter and suffering depression were given forgiveness interventions, and suddenly, after 6 weeks, they become happier, overcome their depressions, and are able to be resilient and hopeful again in life. So absolutely, these positive topics like hope, nobility of purpose, kindness, love, forgiveness, creativity, self-control, these are all things that are being now looked at, particularly, though, I must say, a lot of this was seeded by a wonderful man I knew for many years, Sir John Templeton, who just loved these things, and he left his whole fortune for this, because he said, so many people study human disease and human deficit, and he knew that was important, but he said, what if we could really learn more about these great human strengths and use the sciences? Then he said we might be able to, over 50 years or 100 years, eventually we might be able to overcome a lot of the cynicism and allow people to live much better lives.
Yeah, that's an amazing mind. It's because as a psychologist and a neuroscientist myself, I agree with you. Many people have been telling me when we teach our students, for example, at the University of Maryland, about the fact that we teach a lot about pathology and the pathology of the mind, etc., and we barely know, and we barely train our students in the health sciences regarding health. So how can you help somebody get back on track if you barely have your hands on the tools on how to empower somebody to stay healthy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's amazing. And Dr. Post, we are going to give a short break, and we'll be right back with you to learn more from you and bring in callers who are looking forward to listen to your enlightening answers.
Wonderful.
1 second.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is, It is Good to Be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.nvscenter.org. That is www.nvscenter.org.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is, It is Good to be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.mvscenter.org. That is www.mvscencer.org.
And now we return to our program.
It is good to be good, and this is the show today about the hidden gifts of giving, and we are honored to have Dr. Stephen Post with us. What a bright mind and a loving heart with us to tell us that the world is opening new venues for this understanding about ourselves, that we have the physiology to be good, and we have the molecules, the system, the mechanisms, that if we are triggering by good actions, our lives change so much, our moods. Dr. Post was sharing so much about these hidden gifts of helping. There is a new book coming up, and he's going to tell us more about it. But before we get there, let us share about a passage in the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. You know, in the 1850s, there were these rappings and these noises all around. It became like a movement, the turning tables. In the United States, in 1848, with the Fox sisters in upstate New York, and later in Europe, and then Paris became the center of attention of those phenomena. And one bright mind came to the picture, Professor Revile, later Allan Kardec. The pen name Allan Kardec. He researched very seriously, but he didn't keep himself to research only. Just like Dr. Post, he put it into action. He saw the implications, the moral implications. It's not about talking to the deceased. It's about learning that life is more than the eyes can see. And he published many books, from the Spirit's book to the book Genesis, and he shared with us the voices of the beyond, telling us what it is important in life, how important it is to align our hearts with the heart of the Christ consciousness, with our master, guide, and model, Jesus Christ. In this book, Heaven and Hell, second part, there are many different accounts of those spirits who, the minds, the people who crossed over and came back to tell us how their departure was and what they're experiencing in the spiritual realm. And there's one very beautiful, true account. The Countess Paula. She tells us how good it is to be good, not only when we are here in the flesh, but also when we are in the spiritual realm. Listen to a piece of this beautiful account.
An excerpt from Heaven and Hell. Countess Paula. She was young, beautiful, and rich, of a birth such as the world calls illustrious, and, moreover, an accomplished model of the noblest qualities of heart and of mind. She died in 1851 at the age of 36. She was one of those whose funeral oration is summed up in the words, "In everyone's mouth, why are such people called away from the earth? Happy are they whose memory is thus framed in blessing." She was good, gentle, and indulgent for everyone, always ready to excuse or to attenuate evil instead of envenoming it. Never did a slander pollute her lips. Without pride or haughtiness, she treated her inferiors with a kindness equally exempt from vulgar familiarity and humiliating condescension. Knowing that those who live by their labor or by trade need prompt payment or whatever is due them, she kept no one waiting for wages or pay. The thought that any such delay on her part had caused suffering or inconvenience to a fellow creature would have filled her with remorse. She was not one of those who always have plenty of money for the gratification of their caprices, but who never have money in hand for the payment of a bill. She never imagined that it was in good taste for one who is rich to be in debt, and she would have felt herself disgraced if it could have been said of her that her tradespeople were obliged to give her credit. For that reason, her death provoked so much lamentation and pain, and no complaints. Her beneficence was inexhaustible, but it was not the beneficence that makes a parade of its exercise. Her charities were prompted by kindness, not by ostentation. God only knows the tears she dried, the despairing hearts she calmed and strengthened. For her good deeds, and no other witnesses than those who were the recipients of her goodness. She had the gift of finding out the cases of distress, the most poignant of all, in which the sufferers strive to hide their misery from the world, and she assisted such sufferers with a delicacy that raised the self-respect of those she aided, instead of humiliating them. Her rank and the high official position occupied by her husband obliged her to keep up the style of living obligatory under such circumstances. But while providing largely for the necessities of her social condition, she managed her household expenses with so much order and judgment, and so carefully avoided all waste and all unnecessary outlay, that she spent scarcely the half of what she would have been spent, without making any better show, by most people in her position. Through this judicious management of her fortune, she was able to devote a large portion of her means to the relief of the needy. She had begun her married life by setting apart a considerable portion of her capital, the interest of which was exclusively devoted by her to this purpose, sacred in her eyes, and she thenceforth regarded herself as having so much the less to spend on herself and her household. In this way she succeeded in reconciling the duties she owed to her position and to society with the unwearied activity in doing good, imposed on her equally by her heart and by her conscience. It can be said that this lady was the living example of the charitable lady referred to in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 13. Evoked 12 years after her death by a relative of hers who had become a Spiritist, she gave the following communication in answers to various questions addressed to her. We give this communication, written in German, only the portions of general interest, omitting those that referred to family matters.
You are right, my friend, in supposing me to be happy. I am happy beyond the power of words to express, and yet I am still a long way from the top of the ladder. I am incomparably happier than I was upon the earth, although I was one of the most fortunate of mortals, for I do not remember ever having felt through all my life a real sorrow. I had youth, health, fortune, the homage of all around me, everything that is considered by you as constituting felicity. But what are these in comparison with the happiness we enjoy here? What are the most splendid festivities, in which the guests display their richest attire, in comparison with the gathering of spirits, clad in resplendent brightness of which your eyes could not bear the dazzling luster, but which is the natural appanage of purity? What are your palaces, with your gilded drawing-rooms, your loveliest gardens, in comparison with the aerial dwellings, the vast fields of space, variegated with colors that would make the rainbow seem pale and dim? What are your slow walks and journeying to our flights through immensity, more rapid than the lightning? What are your narrow and cloudy horizons to the grand spectacle of the infinity of worlds, moving through boundless immensity of the universe, under the controlling hands of the Almighty? How harsh and meaningless are your most melodious concert in comparison with the delightful harmony that sets in vibration all the fluids of the ether and all the fibers of the soul? How dull and insipid are your greatest joys compared with an ineffable sense of happiness with which our whole being is constantly pervaded, as with the beneficent effluvium, without the intermixture of the slightest uneasiness, the slightest apprehension, the slightest suffering. Here everything breathes love, trust, and sincerity. Everywhere we find loving hearts. Everywhere we meet with friends. Nowhere do we encounter anything like envy or jealousy. Such, my friends, is the world in which I am, and which you will infallibly reach if you follow the right road.
Yes, dear listener, I know you want to listen to this case until the end, but you can go to the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec in part 2 to read the rest of the case about Countess Paula. How inspiring it is to know that it's good to be good here while you are incarnated, but not only here, also when you depart, because then our minds and our hearts will be connected to the heavenly hearts of these minds of the guardian angels, and will never regret to be good. On the contrary, in this book by Heaven and Hell, Allan Kardec discloses to us that many people actually regretted when they departed from this life the good that they didn't do. So do never deprive yourself. As Kardec says, brings to us in the Spirit's Book 1001, question and answer, don't deprive yourself of one of the purest and sweetest enjoyments of humankind, which is the pleasure of giving. And here we have with us Dr. Stephen Post, the leading scientist on the research of giving, of compassion, altruism, and love. Dr. Post, we want to ask you, what are the current frontiers in the field of research that you have been working on?
Well, there are lots of them. By the way, I do think that it is a great joy to be able to study here on earth the thing that means the most in heaven, and that's giving and love and kindness. And the more we can devote our lives to that, I think the better off we are. But in the terms of the really most exciting new research that I've been involved in, I've been doing a major national study on Alcoholics Anonymous. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I read somewhat about it, but I think our listener will be delighted to know more about it.
So when people go dry, if people have had a problem with alcoholism, they go to a detox unit, sometimes for 4 to 6 weeks, just to get their bodies cleaned out. And then they're typically referred to Alcoholics Anonymous. They attend these meetings anonymously, usually 3 times a week or at least twice a week, and they share their testimonies. One of the requirements in AA, in addition to relinquishing control to a higher power and making a moral inventory, is helping other alcoholics. So we developed a study where we measured the extent to which alcoholics were helping other alcoholics. And here's the exciting outcome. 1 year after going dry, who's really succeeded, who's recovered, and who hasn't. 40% of the alcoholics who help other alcoholics at significant levels, just making the tea at the meetings, putting out the tables, being a greeter at the door, keeping the accounts, visiting other alcoholics in prison or in the detox units, or maybe sponsoring another alcoholic into AA, they have a 40% recovery rate. So 4 out of 10 of them are still dry 1 year after they quit drinking. If they do all the other 12 steps, but they don't help their neighbor, right? If they don't do mutual helping, as you put it earlier, right? Their recovery rate is only 22%. So New York Times headline science section, you double the likelihood of overcoming alcoholism within 1 year of going dry if at a significant level you reach out and help other alcoholics. If you just stay within yourself and think, I can overcome this problem by myself, in myself, through myself, you're wrong. You have to get away from yourself, and you have to reach out, and you have to sincerely benefit others and encourage others, and that's how you overcome that disease. Amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And actually, we have a caller here who is a scientist, and she wants to ask you another question regarding this. Here we have with us Dr. Yasko Arakawa. Hello, Yasko. Thank you for joining Kardec Radio.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call, Vanessa.
Thank you, Yasko.
Really
We have Dr. Post here. Feel free to talk to him and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you to having Dr. Stephen Post in our radio talk, with his enlightened views and research. We've been learning a lot through these guests for Kardec Radio lately. And my specific question, since you talk about the alcoholic helping other alcoholic in the process of quitting,
Yes.
I saw in this paper that you have actually, if you compare the alcoholic helping other alcoholic as Alcoholic Anonymous, the effectiveness of being sober is much higher than if this person, alcoholic, helps in another task, for instance, at home or at work. How does this work actually? How this translates to health actually?
Yes. So that's a really interesting question. If you look at the question of what kind of helping allows alcoholics to recover, the most clear outcome is helping other alcoholics. In medical history, in psychiatric history, they call this the helper therapy principle. And even going back into the 1860s and 70s, in the so-called moral treatment movement, the idea was that people with mild depression or moderate depression would live communally in these asylums, but they were really beautiful. They were wonderfully designed with large grounds, and they would have helping chores. They would bale the hay, milk the cows, prepare the food. They would have responsibilities within community to help other people with their problem, which was depression or melancholy. And in recent studies on MS, people with MS who were asked to make brief, compassionate phone calls to other people with MS over a 2-year period have lower depression, are able to be more resilient, and are able to cope with their situation. So it's in the AA study, it's most clear that when you help other alcoholics, there's a great benefit. I think it's because, first of all, people have a kind of sense, I'm seeing myself in this other individual suffering from my problem, and I'm understanding more what they're going through, what they've experienced, and it just reminds me of how serious a problem my alcoholism is if I don't take care of it. But the other thing is that, it gives people such a sense of effectiveness and ability, because now there's something they really know something about. They've been there. They've done that. They know what it is to be an alcoholic. And now they can offer that knowledge that's right from the heart, right from their own daily experience and struggles. They can offer that to another person, and they have a degree of credibility and purpose that most professionals, to be frank, don't have, And so they feel great gratification and great value in their lives through helping others. And I think those are the key things. But still, if you just see significant levels of helping activity generally in the neighborhood, in your normal environment, that actually is beneficial, but it's simply not as beneficial as helping someone who is an alcoholic themselves. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Yeah. So how this translates into health? Do we have enough, what quote unquote we call in the scientific community, scientific evidence? Actually, do we have some measurements of how this changes the neurochemistry when helping and giving is
yes.
As you say, loving in activity is putting forward?
Yes, we do. In fact, I edited a whole book on this with Oxford University Press in 2007 called Altruism and Health. Altruism and Health, and it presents all the neuroscience, but absolutely. For example, in studies of the helper's high, which is, the studies of the kind of euphoria and elevation in mood that people feel when they just go out and do something to help a neighbor face to face or whatever, that there's a rise in the level of endorphins. And endorphins are brain chemicals that are released when we help others, and they're also associated with less pain. And so there's a kind of interesting effect in many of the studies where something like 10 to 20% of people who involve themselves in helping they self-report an alleviation of chronic aches and pains. In fact, in the United Healthcare study in 2009, that was also the case. So the endorphin release is probably a good explanation of that, because endorphins blunt nerve endings and they alleviate pain. But it's also the case, if you do pain studies, that people don't feel as much pain when they get their mind off it. When you just meditate or reflect on an object in the environment and get your consciousness off pain, you feel less pain. Well, one of the best ways to get your mind off your pain is to be helping someone else in a way that you find meaningful.
That's interesting, Dr. Post. Thank you so much, Yasko, for joining us and making these questions.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Dr. Post, so is it true that this Good to Be Good, the report that you put, is almost like becoming a movement because people are getting into that greater understanding? How are you experiencing this throughout the world?
I get emails from all over the world, and that annual Good to Be Good report, which is on my website, Stephen with a PH, StephenGPost.com website. I put it out every year, and I think this is the 5th or 6th annual report. Mm-hmm. But I keep up with the science and present it, I hope, in a way that everybody can read it. But definitely it's having a big impact. My first book, When Good Things Happen to Good People, which came out about 4 years ago, was a bestseller, and The Hidden Gifts of Helping is successful too. And the funny thing about that one is that the second one is that my family and I had to relocate from Cleveland to New York, mm-hmm. because the position I had at a medical school there in Ohio kind of disappeared, if you will. And so we had to go through all the emotional ups and downs of a big move, a big relocation after 20 years in a place we called home. And what we found, my wife and myself and my son, is that we could only adjust by making a real effort to help others, and that's exactly what we did, Mm-hmm. And so even in these hard times, and I don't know what the economy is going to do Monday. I know what it did last Monday.
Yeah.
But these are difficult times, and we have to be honest that there are a lot of people unemployed. There are a lot of people in the minority communities, especially, who don't have many savings, and they're really hurting. And I worry about people's lives. And the one thing I'll say is that even in the difficult times, one of the best things you can do is just don't forget about the power of helping others. Because in the Hidden Gifts of Helping book, we'd been here in New York for about 6 months, and I was on the train late at night from Manhattan coming out to Stony Brook. It's about an hour-and-a-half ride. And there was only one other person on the train, and his name was Jack. And I asked him how he was doing, and he said, well, I've lost my job. I have cancer. My wife has divorced me, and I have spent down to nothing on my 401k retirement plan. And I looked at him and I said, so what are you doing for Christmas? It happened to be the Christmas season, and I was feeling a little blue because I was missing all my friends in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, I'm going to Port Jefferson, and I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks just working with homeless people through my local Presbyterian church out there. And I said, wow. And he said, yeah. He said, in all of my struggles, the one thing I still have, even in all the darkness and all the shadows, the one thing I still have that brings me joy is knowing that I can help another human being. And I think that's the kind of thing we're going to need to remember over the next few years as we kind of struggle with our lives and try to get the economy back in order. Sometimes we're going to have to make difficult moves. We're going to face a lot of uncertainty. But no matter what the difficulties might be, the hidden gifts of helping are still there.
Yeah, Dr. Post, it's interesting. I have a friend who actually is one of the people in the Kardec radio team, Daniel Santos. He always reminds me and all of us saying, all and everything could be worse. So think about the people who are living in worse conditions and let's help them out. And I remember when I was in graduate school, a friend of mine, we were doing some reach-out work with unprivileged families. She approached me asking, why do you do this, Vanessa? You do this because you feel good? And I said, yes, I feel good about it. So this is selfish. And I said, it's self-love. There's a difference between selfishness and self-love, right?
You got it. Absolutely. So I once did a show with John Stossel called 2020, and I presented a lot of this information. And I kept saying, the benefits we feel are really a side effect, a kind of a byproduct. We're sincere in wanting to help others, but it just happens that human beings are made in such a way that they feel good about this. And so he said, well, isn't it just selfishness? And I agree with you. I said, well, if you want to call the warm glow that people feel when they help other human beings selfishness, we need more of it. There's nothing selfish about it. It's just the right self-love. And that's what all the great spiritual teachers and theologians have emphasized, that, the love of self is right. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. But the thing is, you don't love yourself rightly if you separate that love from the love of God and from the love of neighbor. It's when you're in that context of God and neighbor that you can discover the deeper self. And, every spiritual tradition distinguishes, two ways of living, selfishness, narcissism, whatever you want to call it. I only relate to other people insofar as they contribute to my selfish little agendas and no further. And then I, thou, the great Jewish theologian Martin Buber, I, thou. I discover the mystery and wonder of others, and I love them, and I want to care for them, and it comes from the heart. And when we go from I, it, he called it, to I, thou, we don't lose the I. Rather, the I becomes deeper, more fulfilled, more joyful, more hopeful, and more tranquil, and able to handle the difficulties of life. So whether it's spiritual teaching or scientific teaching, everything converges on this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself.
Oh, Dr. Post, we're so blessed to have you reminding us of this. It's good to feel that there is hope out there. And Dr. Post, let us give one last break before we come back to you and we learn more from you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is, It is Good to Be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.nvscenter.org. That is www.nvscenter.org.
Want to win a Kardec Radio bumper sticker? Give us a call at 858-769-4705 or send an email to kardec@kardecradio.com.
If you have any questions or comments, please call Kardec Radio at 858-769-4705.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Missionaries of the Light by the Spirit Andrea Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.nvscenter.org. www.ediceiofamerica.com today. Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Louise, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear Kardec Radio listeners, this show is about good news. I know you've heard the news about the meltdown of economy, but Dr. Post is reminding us that the solution to keep on walking tall and our heads up is to give of ourselves. And the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec in 1857 told us about this pleasure of giving, which is the purest and sweetest enjoyment of humankind. Read it, Question and Answer 1001. And in the Gospel According to Spiritism, we learn about, there's a whole chapter entitled, Without Charity There is No Salvation. This charity is about loving action. It's about giving of ourselves and the pleasures. And now finally, with God's blessings, we have science vouching for it, telling us how, physically speaking, we are wired and we can trigger these molecules that we are wired even in our brains, the science, the neuroscience of altruism, to be good. Dr. Post, you talked about this feeling of good to be good, and the book that you wrote, published by Oxford University publisher, Altruism and Health. And of all the things, what are the latest news you would tell in the research you have been doing?
Well, I think the two most exciting studies in the last couple of years are, first of all, the one I referred to earlier, where United Healthcare, the largest managed care system in America, began taking this so seriously, and they discovered that of the 41% of Americans who volunteered an average of 2 hours a week, that 68% self-reported that they felt physically healthier, and something like 90% said they felt happier. And so that's a pretty good statement. Another really exciting thing that came out just about a year and a half ago was from the Foresight Project in England. In the UK, they have an organization of roughly 400 of the leading scientists, and they take on big projects for the government over there. And they wanted to find out what predicted happiness in English cities, suburbs, small towns just across the UK. And they found that there were 5 things that predicted high levels of self-reported happiness and low levels of depression. And among those 5 things, and they were all pretty much equally important, was volunteerism, service, and helping others. So that kind of communitas where people take care of their neighbor in small ways, that was a wonderful indicator of happiness. And then I think, finally, I think the studies that we have on clinical health care are really important. So what we found out in the last several years is that, first of all, when patients in hospitals feel that they're treated by their doctors with compassion, they, first of all, tend to be more compliant or to adhere to medical treatments, which can sometimes be very difficult, They also tend to divulge more information about themselves, and so the physicians can arrive at a more accurate diagnosis. And the next thing is that there's actually faster wound healing. So when patients are in anxious, fearful, nervous, emotional states, when they've been treated roughly in a clinical environment, their cortisol levels are up, and cortisol, which is a stress hormone, is well known because it slows down the actual healing process. And so when you can lower stress through really loving your patients, taking the time to just listen to them, be a little attentive, Mrs. Jones, how are you handling this? It must be difficult. It doesn't take a lot, but just make those small connecting efforts. then you lower the stress, and that improves healing. How much? Well, if you look at patients who are stressed out, they heal at 60% the rate of those who are in more tranquil and peaceful states of mind.
Wow.
And so, and this has now been, by the way, associated with the cytokine system with interleukin-6. Interleukin-6 levels are 1.5 times higher in highly stressed patients when compared with low-stress patients. And so we're learning that it really makes a difference in terms of patient outcomes if you treat patients with compassion. And on the other side of it, the doctors and nurses who treat patients with compassion tend to have lower depression rates. They have lower burnout rates. They stay with the profession longer. They're happier with their work because they're back in touch with what is meaningful. And interestingly enough, a recent study, when doctors who are just kind of overcome by the craziness of the modern healthcare system, where they're rushed and pushing and not really able to connect with their patients as well as they'd like to, when they just take a couple of weeks and go to Peru or Mozambique and work directly with, say, needy kids or whatever, they come back and they score much better on these burnout scales, and they continue to improve now at 6 and 12-month intervals. So they're getting back in touch with the reason they wanted to become doctors in the first place, which is to really care in a compassionate way for others. That's pretty cool.
This is amazing, and we have Dr. Post here with us, our friend and also a Kardec Radio team player, Kirsten DeMello, who is also a nurse and wants to talk to you a little bit more about the very subject you have been talking about. Hi, Kirsten.
Hey, hi, Vanessa, and hi, Dr. Post. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yeah, please, go ahead, and you can ask your question, make a comment.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been sitting here listening to Dr. Post. It's really fascinating, especially the last couple of minutes. You really touched on a subject. As Vanessa said, I am a nurse, and I've worked in a critical care setting for a number of years, and most recently I made a choice to get out of the clinical setting for the very thing that you mentioned, the sensation of feeling burnt out. And that is it, what you said, that feeling of being disconnected from the very reason you got into the career, which is to help patients. And when you reach that point where you feel like you're not doing that, you decide to do something else. And the nursing career is so vast and has so many options that I'm blessed with that ability to move away from the clinical aspect and go into something else. But that's just a sidebar. But my question is to you is that when you began doing this research and for sure writing your books, giving lectures, did you find that you had a large backlash from your fellow researchers, scientists, or just colleagues in general?
The cynics.
And if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah, the cynics, yes. Because, Kirsten, there is a certain subset of people who are really they're not just skeptical, they're cynical. They think if anybody even looks upon another human being with kindness and a smile, it's simply an effort to manipulate them. It's simply manipulative. Hey, every once in a while in life, if we're honest, we run into somebody who's kind of, smiley and kind, but we don't really think they're sincere and we don't trust them, and so, that can happen. But people take it too far, and they just think that all kindness is superficial and not real, and so one of my friends, for example, at my former medical school at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, a psychiatrist, was just he read Freud and he read Machiavelli. He didn't believe that compassion was part of human nature. Of course, nowadays you can't say that because we study mirror neurons in the brain. We even know the brain physiology of being able to empathize with others. There's so much science that's going into this, and David Brooks' best-selling book, The Social Animal, seems to help a lot. But there's still people who just, if you start studying human goodness, they put so much burden on you that, it's not, you can study many other things, and they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you try to explain that there is such a thing as sincere human goodness, they will just get upset because it disturbs their kind of comfort zone of, overt cynicism. And there's a lot of that in the world, and so it can be a problem. And also, a lot of people trivialize the study of human assets. They think if you study forgiveness or gratitude or kindness or generosity or love or whatever, somehow that stuff can't be studied scientifically. You can study hate, you can study fear and the brain, you can study all these negative things, but to study these positive things, they think somehow that's unscientific, which is, of course, crazy. So what we're seeing, though, I think, in the last 10 years is a paradigm shift, and a lot of people are increasingly recognizing that we can bring the same quality of science to these strengths that we do to these deficits.
That's interesting. Thank you, Kirsten, for making this important question. Thank you, Dr. Post. And it's about this human goodness, right, Dr. Post, that you're talking about, that especially in the healthcare, as being the director of behavioral sciences program at the University of Maryland, I realized that we need to bring more of this human touch when we're teaching our students, especially the ones that will become directly related to the dealing with patients.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. It's very important. And a lot of, we have students now in the residencies and clerkships who they're great at running tests. They're great at typing information into the computer in the patient's room, but they're not. They don't communicate, and they don't feel that appropriate touch is important. They don't get attentive listening. They just basically are reading the test results, but they're not really connecting with patients. And the patients really suffer the consequences, but so do the physicians and the students.
Yeah. And many of them are afraid because if they are too close, they're going to be sued. People can get mixed messages. So the fear, and I always tell them, and you can tell me more what you think, how to instruct them. I tell them, look, you are here to help them out, so you need to reach out to them. Don't wait for them to reach out to you because you're in charge of making them feel better.
Oh, absolutely. And, medicine is an art as well as a science, and it's all about a healing relationship. There was an article in the Atlantic Monthly just a month ago about how many medications that are prescribed in standard hospitals really don't have much impact, but what has impact is the connection that a patient has with a compassionate, caring physician. So that part of medicine, which is about emotions and mind and body and the interconnection between all those things, that's really crucially important. And when we don't do that, when we just treat people like biological slabs, the kidney in room 4, when we treat them abruptly, when we are dismissive, when we put them in these kinds of hostile, resentful, bitter states of mind because they feel that they were not heard, that's really bad for them. And we need to bring the science to it. I mean, I think that's the key thing is, you teach in a medical area, as do I. I mean, it's great if you can give them role models, and in the end, it's their clinical role models who will make all the difference. But and you can exhort them. You can talk to them philosophically and morally and spiritually about these things. But in the end, it really also helps to have some science, and that's why I'm glad that science is developing in this area, so that they can see empirically the benefits of this approach. You look at, by the way, a movie, a TV show like House. Do you ever watch House?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for House, it's not the patient as person; it's the patient as puzzle, something to be figured out. And if you look at it, typically his patients are not very happy. They're kind of frightened of him. And look at him. He's not very happy. He's having all kinds of problems, including, by the way, substance abuse. And there are lots of studies now pointing out that doctors who lose that kind of connection with their patients are more prone to substance abuse. So, it's a win-win thing. And we have to teach that to students, that it's a win-win thing. And even from the bottom line of the healthcare system, with these new questionnaires coming out in 2012 and 2011, the HCAHPS, Medicare reimbursement is going to be prorated based on whether patients report that they were treated with respect, compassion and communicated with in a careful way. And that means that even from the guy or the gal who's up top, the CEO, they've got to start paying attention to this like they never have before.
That's so interesting. Dr. Post, we're so honored and thankful for your presence in the show of Kardec Radio today. And we'd like to hear more from you. And we know that you're going to be in New York for the Spiritist Forum on September the 25th. And would you say final words for our Kardec Radio listener, please?
Well, if you have a chance, go to the website, www.Stephen with a PhD like Gary Post, StephenGPost.com, and you can read all about the hidden gifts of helping, and pick up some of this science through that. It's a very easy read because it's got a lot of stories and things that are kind of fun in it, but it's also a serious book about our family as we try to adjust and recreate life in a new environment through the power of giving. And we did find it to be healing. And I think that in these times, there's so many people who are going to be tempted to give up on life, who are going to be struggling with setbacks and disappointments and financial chaos. And we don't have much of a choice spiritually and morally. We have to tap into the power of love, because that's the only way we're going to have the kind of hope that will get us through another day. And there will be another day, and it will be a better day. But right now we're being tested.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Post. And dear Kardec Radio listener, as we were honored to have Dr. Post in this show, go dig deeper. Get his book, The Hidden Gifts of Help, and many others he has written. Go to his website, as he mentioned, and learn more from it. Read his philosophy. Get inspired. You want to live a better life. Yes, we know it. That's why you're connected to Kardec Radio. So go dig deeper, because God is good and provides all the resources for us to live a good life. And to live a good life, it's all about this giving of yourself. On Monday at the Spirit Society of Baltimore, we received a beautiful message that now I share with you. It's all about this human goodness and how much goodness is already being spread out in the world. The enlightened spirit, the spirit friend actually said, "Dear children of the soul, we are called to the unique work that guarantees peace of mind. It is the work for the general good, to do good to others. It was not by chance that Allan Kardec published a chapter entitled, 'Without Charity There is No Salvation,' in the Gospel According to Spiritism. Why did the codifier, in his rational mind, propose such deeply religious statement without making the needed bridge to human reason? Why hadn't he put the salvation of our lives in some other theoretical, philosophical, or religious point? Because, dear children, charity is the force of love in action. Love is not the one who says yes, yes at all times, but love tempers itself with the needed no's to oneself and, when necessary, to the neighbor, envisioning the general welfare. This welfare should not be limited by this fleeting life, but based on the immortal vision. He who wants to be happy, be charitable. He who wants to wake up and sleep with a smile on the lips of clear conscience, be charitable despite the problems and difficulties of natural life. This charity shall aim to benevolence towards all without distinction, indulgence towards the fault of others, and tolerance with the imperfections of others. In this slogan of Allan Kardec, "Without charity there is no salvation," we have the Spiritist flag. This flag must be hoisted every day in our hearts. Wake up, dear children of our souls, wake up every day thinking, how can I today make life easier for my neighbor? Often, to help is to facilitate, not necessarily to carry someone on your arms. To stop being a burden, an embarrassment, a hindrance in somebody's life is to help. In fact, to remove the bitterness and harshness of the way of those with whom we live is charity. Oftentimes, a no may be a sign of a new life to someone whom at times were reckless and walking aimlessly. Let us have faith. Let us have deep conviction that God is the supreme intelligence, the primary cause of everything in the universe. The Heavenly Father Mother embraces, sustains, and continues allowing us to live in co-creation. Let us co-create in love to achieve peace. With charity in our hearts, hope in our minds, let us stay united as the world changes day by day, and the regeneration of each of us will blossom in the regeneration of the planet Earth as a whole. The universe then vibrates with every moment of progress of each one of us. Let us hoist this flag of charity in our hearts, judging less and loving more, and inspiring ourselves always. May Jesus be with us now and forever. Thank you again, Dr. Post, and we'll be with you, dear listener, next week at 11 a.m.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.